All right. Next episode of Meet the Goats is Flying J Flash Forward. Oh, I debated whether to show you this video or even take this video, frankly, because my boys are the epitome of a hot mess. So anyway, let me introduce Flash first. Flash is a little over 10 years old. He's the second buck to ever grace my farm. He's a master champion and has been for about 8 years now. And he really was a purchase that I hunted for, I waited for, and I thought through long and hard. He's polled. He has brown eyes. Polled means he has no horns naturally. He has brown eyes, and he has what's called an extreme coat. Now, you can't really tell. You'd have to look back at his younger day pictures. There's a couple of things that have changed about his coat over the years. One, he's just older, and like everybody, your hair, gets a little thinner, gets a little bit of a break. And two is, once he became a master champion, I thought I'd be clever, and I cut it. And I cut it just the length off the bottom, and I cut it pretty far, and it never really grew back in the same way. And with some of these older generation goats, that was one of the things we were looking to improve upon, is the ability to regenerate the coat. Because if you ever want them to become a fiber animal where you could use their coat for fiber, for spinning, for making yarn, etc., you have to have the ability to be able to take some off and regenerate it. And his really never came back in the same way. So needless to say, it was fine. He was retired from the ring. He certainly didn't care. But it did change the overall look of his coat for the balance of his life, which was a bit disappointing for me. What else can I tell you about Flash? Flash has featured heavily in my herd for a long time. He was really my working buck for several years. Like I said, he's 10 now, so he retired out of the breeding game last year when he was 9. And so now he's just a pasture pet and a pasture ornament. So, in theory, you could say, why am I bothering to brush him out? Why am I bothering to work with him if he's just going to be a pasture pet, cut his coat and not sweat it? And I could. I don't want to. I like the way they look. I like taking care of them. I like them to be in their natural form. So if he's going to tolerate me cleaning them up and getting all this work out of them, then I'm going to do it for him. All right. So why did I pick him? I picked him because he was polled. And he had the extreme coat, of course, the genetics for a good coat. But I picked him because he was polled. And I wanted a polled buck because a polled buck would have the possibility of throwing polled kids. Polled kids would have no horns naturally. And, I thought cleverly, if I had polled kids, I wouldn't have to disbud them. They wouldn't have to go through burning their little heads to get the horn buds taken care of. And it would be better for me and my program. Well, a couple things. One is polled is not a genetic trait that passes on to every kid. So, that worked for some kids, but not all, which meant I still had to disbud. So sort of killed that whole reasoning, right? Because it didn't take the act of disbudding away. It just reduced the number of times I had to do it. And I'm not that big an operation that's going to do make a difference in any way, shape, or form. And also with polled and these goats is polled changes the head shape a bit. And it's just natural, right? They don't have horns. So the difference between a head that's prepared to have horns and a head that's prepared to not have horns is a bit of a different shape. And believe it or not, that can make a difference in the ring. So I love Flash. Flash produced babies that went on to do great things in the ring. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, the reason that I chose him was really probably not the best reasoning. And I was still early on in my breeding career. And I was trying to be clever about how I wanted to manage it. Didn't really matter, neither here nor there. Like I said, I featured him as a breeding buck in my herd from the time he was 6 months old until he was almost 9 years old. He has been an amazing part of my genetic pool. I was sad to see him or to have to retire him. Have to is the wrong word. I'm sad to have retired him because I do love his genetics. I do love seeing his production in my herd. But at 10, it's fairly likely at this point that his sperm count is going to be a little down. His sperm motility is going to be a little bit down. And he's earned the right to just relax and be a dude in the pasture. So anyway, that's where Flash is. That's why he's still here. He will remain here on this farm for the rest of his days, as however long that may be many more years. But at any rate, my second buck. Now, as an old guy, this year he got an ear hematoma that's still healing. You can see it's still swollen. That's why his ear is floppy right now. And that came from headbutting the younger bucks and just being a jerk, which is what bucks do. So don't sweat that. His ears used to stand up. It'll stand up again once the hematoma heals. We're just letting it heal. And it's not a big deal. It doesn't hurt him in any way, shape, or form. All right. So why did I not want to put him on camera with you? Sorry, I need to fix his head restraint. It fell off. That happens. Now notice while I'm doing that, the head restraint isn't super tight. It doesn't hold them back from movement. It doesn't hold them in like a prone position or anything. It just keeps him from leaving the stand effectively and from, bucking up, rearing up, I should say, or in general, just being a nuisance when I'm trying to groom him. So why did I not want to show you this process? Because my bucks have gotten out of control, and it's my own fault. And frankly, it happens every year because I don't learn from my mistakes, apparently. Even though I said in a last video or two, I do learn from my mistakes. So what happens? I told you while I was grooming the girls that spring, their cashmere sheds out, their undercoat. Flash has a lot of undercoat, even as an old guy. And his undercoat is shedding out pretty hard right now. You can see it. I'm doing the opposite side on purpose so you can see what a mess he is. I'm just showing you the realities of being a farmer, having time constraints, etc. So when you don't get the cashmere out quick enough as it's shedding, it can get matted into their fur. And it's not matted like a dog gets matted where you have giant knots. You just have big patches of cashmere that are caked with dirt, with bedding from their stall, with grass from the yard after mowing the pasture. You have the grass that's laid down. And it's harder to pull out. And that's what I'm working on now, is just slowly, one section at a time, getting that cashmere out. If I had done Flash, let's call it 4 weeks ago, it would be a little bit faster for him because I wouldn't be pulling things like this out. I'd be working with fresh cashmere that slides through a little easier, and he wouldn't look like he's got clumps all over the place, which is what he looks like now. So why did it get so bad? Kidding season. I was in the middle of kidding season. I had babies, as you well know. We had bottle babies. It's winter. It's cold. The boys are, a hot mess in terms of, we'll talk about why bucks are a hot mess, but the boys are a hot mess. They smell. We'll talk about that in a minute too. And priorities shifted to maintaining the girls and the babies and not the boys. A little bit of procrastination on my end. Yeah, for sure. So I procrastinated just a hair too long, and the boys are a mess. And it's going to probably take me 2 sessions with each boy at least to get them back into shape. And I talked about this with the girls. I don't want to do that. I don't want them on the stand for hours at a time. I don't want them to have to feel like I'm raking through their hair versus just brushing it. You can tell by how Flash is acting. 1, he's used to this. It happens all the time, every year, like I said, because I'm terrible. But 2, it doesn't hurt, right? I'm not pulling his hair out. I'm taking his shed out. And his shed is already released from his skin, which is part of the problem, and migrated down into his coat. So nothing that I'm doing is actually attached to him in terms of pulling things off or hurting him in any way. Sometimes I snag a hair or 2 and you see the reaction, right? It's like finding a knot in your own hair. It hurts a little bit, yeah, but it's not painful in that sense. And primarily, I try not to have that happen. I grab the root of the base of the hair, so while I'm working, it's not pulling on his skin, just like you would when you brush your own hair and you have a knot. Okay, so like I said, I was planning on cleaning these guys up first and then featuring them with their next groom when they were all clean and pretty. And I decided that, you know what? Nope. My channel is about authenticity. It's about realism, right? I don't edit anything, as you've noticed in the quality of my videos. I don't edit. I don't script. I just talk to you about what's on my mind, what I'm thinking, what may have happened recently, what I'm doing. There's no script. There's no editing. Sometimes during kidding season, I put music to the kids playing because that's just fun. Plus, that's an easy feature to do in Facebook and Instagram. So really what you're getting is the reality of the process. And if I'm going to do that, and if I'm going to be authentic, then you need to see when I've done things that aren't so perfect, to say the least. And letting Flash get quite as bad as he is, and having to take maybe 2 sessions to get him done, is reality. Is it a bad thing? You know, at the end of the day, no, it's not. It's time out of his life. It's time out of my life. It's a little bit extra elbow grease for me and a little bit more patience from him, but we're going to get through it. And we are going to be just fine for the balance of the year. And then I'm going to get caught up in next year's kidding season, and the same thing is going to happen because, you know, like I said, I've repeated this issue multiple times at this point, even though every year I swear I won't. So there you have it. Why Flash is a hot mess and why I thought I wasn't going to show this video or even take this video, frankly. All right, let's go back to talking about bucks for a second. You need to have bucks on your farm, or that's not really true, is it? You need to have bucks in order to breed, right? You need a boy. You can do artificial insemination, which means that you buy straws of semen from other people's bucks and artificially inseminate your does. That is not really popular in this particular breed. I'm not aware of anybody in our breed that is collecting semen from their bucks right now. So can it be done? Absolutely. Is it done? Not really. The other alternative to owning bucks is you can lease bucks. And there are some people that will lease their bucks, meaning they send the buck to your farm for a month. He spends the month impregnating your does, and then you send him back home, and you pay for that service. I don't do that. One, I don't want to go through biosecurity to bring a different animal onto my farm from someone else's farm. I would have to quarantine them. I would have to do all sorts of testing to make sure that they didn't bring anything in with them, including parasites. And it's not my preference to do that. I also don't lease my bucks for the same reason. I don't send them off the farm because even though I could make a little bit of cash from them when they're not doing anything here, there's biosecurity problems. There's risk of somebody else not maintaining them the way I would want them maintained. They get exposed to something I wouldn't want them exposed to. And I just don't want to do that to my animals. And it's not worth any money, any amount of money to me to do that. So they stay right here on the farm. And that means I need to own bucks to breed my does, and they get one time a year to do their job, and the rest of the year they just eat food and pasture and require me to groom them, require me to clean their stall, require me to do all sorts of extra work, right? Just for the sheer ability to breed my does once a year. Not the most cost-effective method, but it's important to me to do it in a way that I feel is safe, appropriate, and makes sense. So if you're going to have one buck, you need to have two because goats can't live alone. And your buck can't live with your does because they would absolutely, the buck would attempt to breed them all year long. As the does are pregnant, they'd be harassed. They wouldn't let him breed at that point because they're pregnant, but they would be harassed. The minute they gave birth, they would go back, they do go back into heat, and he would be all over them again. So, that sort of defeats the purpose again, too. I don't want my does bred multiple times in a year. It's bad for their body, and I absolutely would not want them pregnant while they're nursing kids that are just born, which would happen if your buck was running with your does. The other issue with that is you wouldn't know due dates, right? One of the reasons that I'm so keen on being here when my does are going to give birth is because I know when they're going to give birth. I have it down to a particular day, and then the window, right? So they should be giving birth at day 150 from the time of conception, and that's a plus or minus 5. So I have a 10-day window where I know my doe is going to kid. Takes a little pressure off of me in terms of monitor and watching, and it also enables me to be sure that I manage my schedule so that I can be here when the event happens. So that's why I don't run bucks with does together. So if you're going to keep a buck, you need at least two, so your buck has a friend. You could have a wether. A wether is a castrated male. Castrated males are my favorite way to have boys. Most of the boys that are born on this farm, in fact, about 95% of the boys born on this farm became wethers. They get castrated before they go home, and they just are fabulous pasture pets. I don't have wethers here on my farm for the sole purpose of the fact that a wether is a pet, is a companion animal. They make the best pets. They're also the best on your pocketbook. But for me, they're not producing anything. They're just eating and being a part of my ecosystem, being a part of my workload, and that makes no sense, right? To have an animal that isn't producing in the situation that I'm in. So $2 minimum. Great, not a problem. $2 is pretty easy to handle. Bucks are not pets. They are not companion animals, not because they're dangerous. In fact, my bucks are super sweet and I love them and I kiss them and everything else, but bucks smell. Bucks make themselves sexy for the girls by peeing all over themselves, by having a musky scent, and of course the scent of their pee all over themselves enhances that. They pee on their faces. Yes, it's lovely. With this breed, that really only happens in rut. Rut is what is about the time that they're expected to breed. That's in fall. So they're not peeing on themselves heavily year round, but they do have a stink year round. Do I mind it? No. Is it something that everybody would want? No. So that's why having a buck, kind of creates a decision point for you, right? It's not just having a buck, it's having at least 2 bucks. It's not just having extra goats, it's maintaining and managing bucks who are a bit larger, a bit heavier, technically should have better coats because they have more testosterone, which drives the better coat. So yeah, bucks. Now, I run a really small herd. I've talked to you about that before. I do not run a herd of, 50, 60 goats. My herd right now is at 14, and this weekend it's about to go down to 11. And that does not include the babies. So I have 3 bucks, which seems ridiculous when you think about the fact that I'm going to have 8 does and not all of them are of breeding age. Right? 2 of my does are my old ladies. They're retired. So that takes me down to 6 does already. And most of those are in their mid-years and will be retiring soon anyway. So I don't need 3 boys to breed those girls. It's excessive. Why do I have 3 bucks then? Well, for me, it's about the genetics. It's about how to pair things up appropriately so that if I do keep babies, I have other bucks to breed them to that are not related. And it's about the ability to manage my herd in such a way that I'm not making poor decisions for lack of the ability to make decisions. What do I mean by that? So you saw Lotus, Jezebel, Lotus, and Sock Monkey. Those are 3 generations, same line of does, right? Starting from Jezebel on down. If I have 2 bucks, I can breed Jezebel to a buck. Let's pretend I bred her to Flash. And then her baby, Lotus, for the sake of the example, could be bred to the other buck. My next buck that you'll see is Santa. So we'll breed her to Santa. And that means Sock Monkey is now related, as the 3rd generation to both bucks. So what do? Do I breed Sock back to her grandfather, Flash? That's okay. It's acceptable. And in certain cases, it might even be desirable if you're really trying to lock in a specific genetic trait. But it's not ideal for me. I would prefer that the closest relation be a great-grandparent, not a grandparent. So in order to do that, when you think through the example of 2 bucks, you need a 3rd buck. And if your 3 bucks are completely and totally genetically unrelated, which mine are, then you can do almost anything with the generations, right? That's how Flash has been able to stay active and breeding in my herd for as many years as he has. He is, gosh, like I said, used him for a little over 8 years, right? Think about that, and think about the size of my herd. So in order to be able to do that, there had to be a way. I could repeat breedings, of course, but also to be able to breed him to kids born on the farm that were not related to him. So I have 3 bucks, completely unrelated, no genetic relation whatsoever, and that way, generation 1 is related to 1 buck, generation 2 is related to that buck by, virtue of it being their dad, bred to another buck. Generation 3 is now related to 2 bucks on my farm and can be bred to buck 3. And then generation 4, which is now theoretically related to all 3 bucks on my farm, but can be bred back to that first buck, their great-grandparent, because think about how dilute then that is, right? None of those genes have been repeated over the course of those 3 generations. Other does and other bucks have been introduced. So you're not talking about the potential for inbreeding or line breeding at that point. The great-grandparents don't even show up on their pedigree. Not that that matters. Otherwise, I would be like secreting it, you know, not talking to you about it. But it's so distantly genetically related at that point that it's like they're not related. And that's how you can manage with 3 bucks. And so 3 bucks is about my level of management for this herd. There are times that I've had 4. 4 is completely unnecessary, and that happened just because, you know, we had Flash getting older. I had a baby I kept. I had one that was starting to be too related to everybody. So 4 bucks is too much for my herd, and 2 bucks is not enough. But bucks are a decision, right? You have to have a separate pasture for them. You have to have a separate stall. Obviously, I keep everybody in the same barn. But the way we developed the barn is the bucks are on the left side of the barn and the does are on the right side of the barn, so that they're not even really touching each other. They can see each other when they're out in the pastures, but their pastures don't touch, so there's no fence breeding potential. The likelihood of an escape breeding is like slim to nil because of the way we're set up. So we made some really strategic decisions before we started breeding and around the keeping and management of bucks. So I think I'm going to cut it off here. I'm just about finished with one side of him. And so you can see why I say, you know, like, I don't like leaving them this and letting them get this bad, because it takes a bit longer to do a side, and that's just not right for the goat. But we'll do a part 2 with his other side, and you know, you'll see how beautiful he is when he's done, and then he'll be maintained for the balance of the year, and I won't let it get this way again, and you guys are all going to hold me accountable to showing you. That's what you need to do. You need to mark your calendars, and February next year, start harassing me to groom my bucks. Maybe that'll make me fix my mistakes. All right, guys, listen, I really appreciate you hanging in with me and being a part of my community. It means so much to me. Also, if you can and you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Doesn't cost you anything, but I'm slowly trying to work my way into getting a couple of pennies out of this channel, and I'm nowhere near close yet, but you know, every little bit helps, and I really appreciate it. Share with your friends, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.